Welcome back to On the Light, a podcast dedicated to illuminating the profound teachings and legacy of Yogacharya BKS Iyengar. I'm your host, Susan Johnson. In this episode, Lee and I have the great pleasure to be joined by Prashant Iyengar. Here, Prashant expounds more on his father's practice, explaining to us how there was not so much to watch in terms of Guruji's practice, but rather much to understand. He begins to tell us what Guruji meant by saying that he was a philosopher when he practiced. Prashant also gives us insight into his family's lineage, going as far back as 15 generations. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light. So, how are you, Prashantji?
Well, I'm fine.
Good.
What do you have interest in talking about today? About Guruji's practice and teaching, the stages. So I will be talking about that. At the outset, let me tell you, when it comes to practicing, we try to infer, deduce, extrapolate what must be his practice based on what we practice. Our practice gives us a kind of idea, and we try to take that idea and try to imagine what must be his practice. But that will not be proper. Basically, to understand Guruji's practice, at some stage, one has to understand what is yoga. Because you people were used to watching his practice, and you came and watched his practice. And therefore, most of you got the idea it's an object to watch and understand. Watch and comprehend, watch and understand. But while these are yogasanas, so little insight into philosophy of yoga would tell us that there is not much to watch, there is much to understand and much to comprehend. And I have many times given this kind of understanding in my classes, showing at Guruji's photographs in the hall, the panoramic view. I said, what will you see? What he does internally? What we can see is only what his body does. The configuration of body, features of body. He will look at his muscles and body and posture. That nowhere yoga is there. Hardly any yoga is there. So one must understand what is yoga to really understand Guruji's practice. Now, the other day I told you that he had different stages of practices, which, as I said, when we came to Pune, he was trying to just get the postures. Many of the postures were not coming to him. So he was trying to get as many postures as he could get. So he struggled for getting the postures, getting the various asanas, then trying to refine them for presentation, for demonstration. So this I spoke last time. So you can take a leaf from there. So I won't delineate on that. But we should know that there was a background for Guruji. That generation, Guruji of that generation, where there was background, family background, cultural background, the ethnic background, and you all know that Guruji was having theft on his head, and that he had to cut it. Now that's a sign of Brahmin. And so when he came to Pune, he did come with the tuft on his head. And then in 4950, he had to cut it because then he got exposure to non-Hindus. The most unfortunate thing about Guruji's life, considering the time that he was in, it was perfect for the time, but overall view, it was not his fortune. He was not a fortunate person. He had to teach. When he came to Pune, he came out from his native place. So basically, to be in native place, home situation, home surrounding is very important in a subject like yoga. But he came to Maharashtra, language was a problem. Then people, is almost a foreign country for him. When he came to Maharashtra, when he came to Pune, it was like going abroad in 1937. And all his students were coming with some body complaint, body maladies, mind problems, and they wanted solutions to their problem. Really wanted to do yoga. Nobody really wanted to learn yoga. Now, if we consider myself, well, I'm greatly fortunate. People are coming to me not with complaints of body and not with complaints of mind, but they are coming to learn yoga. So that's the spade work that he did. I am now reaping the fruits and enjoying the fruits of it.
Yeah, it kind of laid the groundwork for you in a way, I guess.
Then Parsis, major his students, chunk of his students, major chunk was Parsis in Pune and Mumbai. So they are not Hindus. And therefore, he had to keep those orthodox practices for himself, and he was not given any facility to teach. Now, I can be teaching, I speak about the eternal Sanatan Dharma, I bring Vedic culture, I bring Hindu culture, I say so many things about it, but he did not have this opportunity. Yoga is a philosophy, and now I can teach the subject as a philosophy. Mm-hmm. But in his time, he had to propagate. So he had to read the minds of people and cater what the people wanted. I don't cater what people wanted when they come to my class. I give them what I should give. So I am reaping the fruits. I'm very fortunate because he did all the spade work, all the foundational work. Now the structure of yoga can be coming up. And that is the opportunity that I'm getting, which he did not get. Mm-hmm. He had to sideline that when it came to exposure of yoga out in public or teaching yoga. But for his practice, it was very much philosophy, the foundational aspect. That is why later years he started speaking. It was too late when he spoke about Dharmendriya. Lee should be knowing it. He spoke about the 4 Varanas, the 4 ashramas, Brahmacharya ashram, Grihastha ashram, Vanaprastha ashram, Sannyasa ashram came his teachings. But this was quite late in his life, quite late. Then he started referring to Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. So this became a part of his teaching, if Lee remembers. But then, of course, sufficient background was not there for students to catch it, understand it. But it came out in his spontaneous teachings. So he spoke about Dharmendriya. He spoke about 4 Purusharthas. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Now, this is our background. We know that we are not only for one lifetime. We had several lives, and we will have several lives hereafter. And therefore, we have this broad foundation to our eternal culture, what we call as eternal dharma, not religion, eternal dharma. So all this was background for him. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, Varnashram Dharma, the Kartavya Dharma, the Karma Vipaka. So this was all very much underlying his practices, which he did for himself. So his practice was 3-dimensional. One was for his yoga, which he had to explore, experiment, discover, which I often say that yoga is a discoverative subject, explorative subject, experimental subject. We have to experiment, we have to discover, we have to explore. Yoga is not like a physical science that you have a text and that you just try to comprehend the text, like physics, chemistry, biology, botany, zoology, physical sciences, social sciences. These are sciences. Yoga is not such a science. It has to be explored. The very spiritual pursuit in India is not just to have some spiritual practices. It is exploring oneself. We have a self, but we have not explored the self. We have to explore the self. None of us are without a self, but none of us really know the self. If we know the self, we faultily know the self. So the adhyatmic aspects of yoga are all discoverative, explorative. So that was something which was in his blood, because we all came from Brahmin family. At this juncture, I can say that the famous temple in Tirupati, which is the richest temple in the world, richest shrine in the world, and daily, nearly 300,000 to 400,000 people visit the shrine daily. And in that shrine, one of our ancestors, if you have read in the book, Glorious 70 Years, that was a commemorative volume brought out in a 70th birthday celebration. So Lee must be having it. So we have shown the lineage. Savita has written an article on the whole family. And one of our ancestors, nearly 14 heads, 15 heads behind me, 14 heads behind Guruji. He composed what is recited for 400 years in the temple every morning at 4 o'clock. It is called Venkatesh's Prabhatam. You can get it on YouTube and you can hear it. That morning chant, which takes place at 4 a.m. to wake up the deity in the morning. So that was composed by our ancestors. We had the background of Vishishtadvaita philosophy of Sri Ramanuja. I don't know how many of you have idea about Sri Ramanuja and his philosophy, his life, his philosophy. So that was the background for us. Our ancestors were very orthodox, and one of our ancestors traveled in those days to a distant state called Gujarat. He went to Gujarat and Rajasthan to propagate the philosophy of Ramanuja, Sri Ramanuja. So we had scholars in Vishishtadvaita philosophy. It is qualified monism. And we had such ancestors who were in the philosophy, who had imbibed philosophy so much so that they could go and debate. They could go out and debate. They could go out and argue and win the debates. So one of them was Prativadi Bhayankaram Anna. He was 15th head ancestors to me, ancestral 15th head, and he composed that. Then my grandfather was a school teacher. My elder uncle, that is Guruji's elder brother, was also well versed in religious aspects, rituals, religions, the observances, etc. So my elder uncle, that is elder brother of my Guruji, was well versed in it. He could be in arguments with Guruji's Guruji, T. Krishnamacharya. Many times they were at loggerheads. So my uncle would discuss so many things of Iyengar community. Iyengar is not a surname. It is not a family name. It is a caste. It's a caste. And therefore, we have a philosophy, we have a cult, we have a religion. And my uncle was quite well versed and he could be arguing with T. Krishnamacharya. You all know T. Krishnamacharya was a scholar. But my uncle was also equally scholar in Vishishtadvaita philosophy and the religion, dharma of Ramanuja. Anyway, so we had such a background, and that was naturally in Guruji's blood. The philosophy was very much in his blood. He could not pursue it. In teachings of his yoga, the philosophy could not get even a small entry because his mission was to propagate yoga and propagate yoga in the West. So, and in the West, you know that a condition was put when it was introduced to educational institutions in England. They put a condition not to bring religion, not to bring the Hindu culture, Indian culture. It should be purely physical wellness program. If you are prepared to do that, we will give you free hand. Your yoga should go only as physical wellness, physical well-being. So this was a condition on him. This was a sanction put on. He should not speak on Om. He should not speak on God. He should not speak on anything that is Hindu. So he had to face so many sanctions. So in his teachings, many things could not come until nearly 1980s. Then he was little free. And of course, he had senior students who were doing yoga for 20, 25, 30 years by 1985. Then slowly he had the chance to introduce them to certain concepts. And that's why he spoke about Dharmendriya. Now, where does Dharmendriya come? It is Dharma. Where does Dharma come? Dharma comes in 4 Purushartha. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So what is the purpose of human life? So these are 4 purposes given to human beings that we must adhere to, accomplish this, practice them. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And therefore his teaching, he was explaining what is Dharma, what is Artha, what is Kama, what is Moksha. But then it was in tits and bits and very little encouragement from his students. Later what happened, his students, he encouraged them to become teachers because he wanted to propagate yoga. That was his mission of life. So because it was to be propagated, he thought it is best way to encourage the foreigners to become teachers. So formalization of the certification program was set up in mid-70s and onwards. So he had to teach students to become good teachers. He could never teach students to become good students of yoga. And therefore, his teaching gave more emphasis on turning out teachers who would be teaching as physical wellness, mental wellness program. And therefore, the philosophy was totally sidelined because of the mission that he had in hand. He could not bring in the philosophy of yoga, religion of yoga, or whatever the culture of yoga. He had to give them, because they all were actually quacks, although they were certified yoga teachers. Sorry to say this, Lee, you are a certificate holder. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So sorry to say this, because he had to issue certificates for them to teach the subject of yoga as physical culture, physical wellness program, mental wellness program to address the maladies of the people, suffering people, ailing people. And even if they are not ailing, they can get some physical wellness, well-being. Not that all were ailing students. The students were also learning the physical wellness program in yoga, postures, and therefore anatomy, physiology, good for liver, stomach, colon, bladder, spleen, pancreas, heart, lungs, good for mind, psyche, consciousness. So it became a very consumer subject. So Guruji had to do that. And he had to give importance to consumeristic aspects in yoga because he turned out teachers. So he had to help them for almost until his last breath, because people were writing, we have student who has this problem, that problem, to sciatica, to cancer, to menstruation, to pregnancy, to what? Mental problems, to Alzheimer's and this and that. So he had to help them out. He could not say that don't help such a patient. He had to assist his teachers for them to help their students and their clients. So the philosophy got sidelined. When it came to teaching of yoga, when it came to presenting yoga, he could not make a presentation of yoga, even lecture demonstrations. We could not bring in philosophy. There was no chance to bring philosophy except say something at the beginning that it is one of the 6 orthodox philosophies. That's all he could say, and not much. But when it was his practice, he was practicing yoga. Let me tell you, at this juncture, he was not a man whom usually we idealize such person walk the talk. Those who walk the talk and talk the walk. What he practiced was totally different than what he taught. His practice was absolutely private, absolutely personal. So he was trying to open out the fount hole of philosophy of yoga while he was practicing on his own. Now, this fountain could not be seen by students watching him outside. They only saw what he's doing in body, maybe will over matter, determination, man of resoluteness, man of volition, will, etc., etc. This is how his students read. Then nobody read him that he's a humble person. Is that right, Lee?
Yes.
Nobody read that he was a humble person.
Yeah.
But when he was practicing, he had to be humble very naturally. He was humble. So he was all the time putting on mask when he moved out in the world. He had to conceal his the philosophy that he was practicing, that was running in his blood, running in his system. He had to conceal it completely. So his practice was totally different. His practice gave him all those revelations about Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, connected to Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Aspida. Lee, do you remember? He connected the 4 Samprajna Samadhi with 4 Bhavanas, which comes in Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, Anam, Sukhuta, Punya, Punya, that sutra.
Yes.
So he was trying to relate the mysterious aspects of art and mysterious aspects of the brain. It was in very later part in his teachings, post 1985, if I may say so. Not until then. Until then, he went to all over the world to help the teachers solve their problems, give them kind of some inputs which would help them to teach better. He could not really impart yoga. The student should have shown interest. I had said this sometimes. He wanted the student and come to India and learn rather than learning in 3 days in New York and 4 days in Paris and 6 days in London. That's how they did. Yoga is not a subject which can be learned in 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 days or a week or a month or 3 months or 6 months even or 1 year. So
He
he
criticized the workshop culture. He criticized that
very
workshop
much, very
culture.
much. And that's all consumerism. It is for common man, layman, to draw them into the fold of yoga, which is yoga, Y-O-G-A-A-A-A. So he had hinted his students that they should try to come and learn in India. Come to India and learn. But then they became professional teachers. Now they could not be coming and stay here longer time, because they had commitment with, because that was their profession. So they could hardly come for a month for intensive courses and go back. But he, in his hearts of heart, wanted them, some of them, to come and stay in India for a while. And therefore, they would get the taste of classical yoga, which I am trying to now cater. He wanted to do that. Take the instance of his 85th birthday celebrations. I told you this, that was completely based on the book that I was trying to write, and which, of course, now it has seen the light of the day. So, Panchavrittis, Chittabhumis, Trigunas, Kleshas. So this was the theme of that 85th birthday celebration. Now that institute, he was showing that the basis of his teaching was in Yoga Sutra, Yoga philosophy, Sankhya philosophy. So it came very late in his life that he could venture to bring in philosophy in his teachings. While his practice, right from Light on Yoga days, when he thought of writing the book, I told you that he had to look into the books of philosophy to really pen down a book like Light on Yoga. So his study had started. He had read all the Upanishads, the Gitas, the Itihas, Puranas, the Mahabharata, etc., etc. He was actually subscribing to the Kannada literature, because that is his mother tongue. That was his first language. So he was subscribing for volumes of Mahabharata, which came in Kannada, volumes of Srimad Ramayanam, which came in Kannada, Srimad Bhagavatam, which came in Kannada. So that could touch his heart, because our languages have the very culture, ethos of our philosophy, our religion, etc. English doesn't have it. Unfortunately, he had to write all books in English, but his notes were in Kannada. He first wrote down the Kannada notes in Kannada, and then he translated into English. So the culture could not be transmitted through the translations. If he had written a book in Kannada, that would have been a gem of a things, because he could have depended on the cultural material of yoga through taking recourse to Kannada language. But he did not write a single book in Kannada. It is because of his occupations, busy commitments in life. Then he wanted to write books only in English, because then all his readers were English readers. So my initial books were in Marathi too. They are Marathi. Later I translated into English. So my English is Sanskritized. I don't bother whether readers understand it or not. I just write it. If you want to understand, you will understand whenever you should understand. But he had to make it reader friendly, because he had publishers. I did not go for a publisher, because no publisher would have taken my books. So that's why I opted for home publication. Myself became a publisher. So I had no kind of conditions from publishers. Like, for instance, Light on Yoga, the first book, it is not the original book. And I've said this many times. Because Gerald York, he edited the book and he made it reader friendly for the Western audience. He wanted it for Western audience to be appealing. So he did a lot of cutting, etc. Book was cut short, a lot of editing work to suit the Western mind. I have not written any book to suit the Western mind. So that's my fortune. I didn't have to take recourse to that. But he had to depend on that. So original Light on Yoga was never produced. So it was all edited by the editorial committee of the Allen and Unwin publications. Anyway, so he wanted the reader to understand his book. I merely try to write the book to present the subject. Understanding is your problem. If you don't understand, it is your problem. You see that you understand sooner or later. Make endeavor to understand my books. I will not write it to make it reader friendly. I wrote it for those who are interested in the philosophy of yoga. I started writing the books. So I had that advantage because I had the whole column raised by Guruji. So someone like Lee, etc., even after 40, 50, 45 years of learning from Guruji, they are still learning from me, because now they can learn. If I had come, say, to your countries in 70s and started teaching the way I'm teaching today, I would have been isolated quickly. I would have been never invited back to US again. Anyway, now that is not the case with me. So his practice is something that those who are insight in yoga can understand. I also understood when I got insight into Yoga Sutra. This was post 1980-85. I had just commenced reading Yoga Sutras in maybe 75, 74, 75. And I did not get insight. When I got insight, then I started understanding what Guruji must be doing internally. What is his internal dynamics? I could visualize. So he is doing Triguna management, he is doing Panchavritti management, he is doing the Panchaklesha management, he is doing the Purushartha management, he is doing the Chatur Purushartha management, he is doing the Varnashram management, etc. So this only I got insight when I understood what yoga is. Chitta Vritti, the Chitta is timeless. Mind is not timeless. We do for our minds. What is that mind? Born in so-and-so year, born in such community, born in such status, such culture, such ethnicity, we think that is the mind. But our chitta has gone through subhuman species, human species, celestial species. We all have incarnated in all those life forms. So chitta is totally different. The definition of yoga is yoga chitta vritti nirodha, and we say chitta is mind, but the definition is not yoga manovritti nirodha. The mind is temporary. Mind comes with your birth or comes with your karmas, which are prarabdha karma, destiny, that only mind comes. But we have the mind in manomaya kosha, which is ageless. So panchakoshas, what are panchakoshas? A little insight in yoga will tell you that we have 8.4 million life classes, births, which are infernal, terrestrial, celestial beings. So we all have this in our mind stuff. How will you understand? By looking at Guruji's Shirshasana, Sarvangasana, Trikonasana, Vrishchikasana. What will you understand his mind? You will say, oh, man of determination, man of strong will, strong volition, resoluteness, not prepared to give up, challenging, challenge taking, challenge giving. That's not what we will be reading. That's not the whole of the mind. That is only profile of the present mind. For that particular incarnation, that is the mind. But we have so much behind it, so much underlying it. And yoga is that. So his practice was totally different. That was not an object for sight, vision. That was object for intelligence, provided you understood something, little bit of what yoga is. And therefore, his students could not understand what he is really practicing. Why did he say, I am philosopher while I practice? What do you mean by philosophy? Nobody asked the question, what is philosophy? What philosophy? How is it that teaches philosophy while you practice? Nobody dare ask him this question. They only heard this, while I practice, I am a philosopher. Now, you all have an idea. Philosopher means what? Thought speculation, analytic philosophy, descriptive philosophy. These are the philosophies which the Western world knows about. So you ask any professor of philosophy, what are the philosophies? Material philosophy, spiritual philosophy, analytical, descriptive, etc., etc. Speculative. In our philosophy, there is no speculation. We know what is truth. We have to search the truth. While the Western philosophers were trying to find out the truth. What is truth? They were trying to find out. We know what is truth. We try to understand and identify the truth in what we have around and what within us. So there are atheistic philosophies, theistic philosophies, etc., etc. While when he said he was practicing philosophy, nobody asked him question, are you practicing theistic or atheistic? What philosophy are you practicing? Are you practicing Oriental philosophy or Occidental philosophy? What is your philosophy? Now, today we have these Oriental, Occidental philosophies. materialistic philosophy, trans-materialistic philosophy, or spiritual philosophy, etc. Nobody dare ask him question. So he could not really open out what is philosophy. While he was practicing, all these which were in his blood, in his system, the ageless system in him, that was coming to surface, and he was working with that. So he started saying that while I practice, I'm a philosopher. This was quite late after the advent of light on yoga. Because light on yoga, he had to project it as a philosophy. So he's also trying to introduce you to that philosophy. And therefore, that could gain more importance for his philosophy in his practice. He never said that in 1940s. He never said that in 1950s, because he himself was not aware of it. He thought it is physical culture. He thought it is a remedial. It is a pathy. That's how yoga was introduced to him. And that's how he was encouraged to take yoga to the world as a pathy and as physical culture. But when he got on to writing Light on Yoga, then of course he had to read Bhagavad Gita, he had to read Upanishads, he had to read Sankhya Yoga philosophies, he had to use whatever Indian philosophies. And then that opened out that portal for him. Now, they were all in samskars, but samskars need some triggering cause for them to manifest. So he was suppressing all the time those samskars. The Brahminic samskars were depressed because of his hectic life, starting to earn money for 2 meals. Extremely difficult life he had, hardships. For his 2 meals, he had to struggle. No, that's not the case for me. I born with silver spoon or golden spoon in my mouth. I never had a problem. How will I earn money? That was never the problem for me in my life. So his practice is completely invisible. So sometimes we can delineate on it. So I will bring as to how there are these philosophical tenets in our culture, which are the foundations to our system of yoga, the foundational blocks. So that I can talk to you sometimes.
And this is something that I had in mind to suggest to you as a topic if you ever want to touch on it. And that is, we all know something about how Guruji started with his practice. We have heard about that. Then there was the periods where in his development, and then when we were able actually to be there and see him. And as you say, we saw the physical outside of the practice. But this time when he was nearing the end of his life, Kristen and I were there last time we saw him. 5 weeks before he passed away.
Oh, yeah.
And, Suchita, after class, Suchita would invite us in for coffee. And this is a time when, as you know, Guruji was not going over to the hall anymore. And yet there he was as we walked through the front door and joined the sisters over in the side room for some coffee. There he would be. And there was this intense depth, spiritual depth and silence of him over that Viparita Dandasana bench. And, we stopped, we paid our respects to him, and he accepted our respects, but he was secluded in that silent teaching of himself, that silent learning that goes on. I mean, Ramana Maharshi says that the commentary of silence is the best commentary. And the depth of that silence and his internalization was profound. And if you ever, I know there were the family members, Harit told us that, he would always stay up at night, or one of the kids would always stay up at night because Guruji would be practicing through the night and he may need a prop moved here or there or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a
even then, before that, even when he was practicing in the hall, I could imagine what he is doing internally. People could not identify that is whether he's doing karma kriya or gnana kriya, or whether it's in vachik kriya, whether it's in prana kriya, whether it's whatever kriya, cultural kriya, whether it's in brahmani kriya. This is not a matter for you to cite. So internally, he was structuring an asana for a primary culture, Kshatriya, Brahma dharma, Kshatriya dharma, Vaishya dharma. So if we take up this topic, when Guruji said, when I practiced, I was a philosopher, so we will try to take up this question: what is meant by he being philosopher? What did he really practice? What are the practice of philosophy? We know philosophy should be understood, philosophy should be spoken of. We can only speak on philosophy. We can understand philosophy. What is practicing philosophy? So this can be elaborated. Then I will tell you how the philosophy circumscribes the whole human purpose. See, otherwise philosophy in the West is intellectual gymnastics. In the West, it is intellectual gymnastics. Where does the heart come in philosophy, tell me? Nowhere. But that is not the case in our philosophy. Every philosophy has ethico-religious system. And what is that ethico-religious system? Yama, Niyama to the Ashtanga Yoga is the ethico-religious system of yoga. So it has the material of philosophy that can be lived, that can be nourishment, and that can be practiced. So nobody so far ever asked me even a question about when Guruji said he was a philosopher, what does that mean? I'm so sorry, nobody came up with this question. Now, incidentally, this question has erupted. So we will deal with this question and I will try to explain what is meant by that. Then you will have insight that for those 45, 50 years when he was practicing his yoga, what was the philosophy in it? So, because later he did not have to practice for display, he did not have to practice for medical experimentations. It was all spontaneous, it was all intuitive. Anybody had a heart problem, he would intuitively tell what to do. He was not going for any research, what to do for particular coronary problem, particular liver problem. He was not experimenting. Before that, he was experimenting. He had to try it out. But a time came later that he did, it was all intuitive teachings. When it came to teaching students for their problems, he was not experimenting. So suppose he was living, when Corona came up, do you mean to say he would have experimented what is Corona, then how to work for Corona, what to do for this the Corona problem? He would not have experimented. It was all intuitive for him. So he did not have to experiment. When he said, I was a scientist when I was teaching. This was the early part of his teaching. Later, he was not a scientist. He was highly creative, intuitively creative person while he was teaching. In the earlier part of his teaching, he had to be like scientists. What is it if a 20-year-old boy has a kidney problem and an 80-year-old person has a kidney problem? So he had to have some experiments carried out. So that was the early part of in his teaching, that he had to be scientist. Not that he was all the time scientist to teach. He was off this track, say by 1975-80. Thereafter, he was teaching intuitively, not scientifically. He was not working as a scientist to teach what to teach this person, what to teach that person, what to teach this case and that case. He was never a scientist. Until that time, he was a scientist. When he was teaching, he was a scientist, but he did not get opening to say that while I teach, I'm a philosopher. Students did not qualify to that level. That's why he could not do that. They should have studied yoga. They should have had insight into yoga. They should have inquiry into yoga. Nobody inquired into when he said, Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda in the brain, the 4 compartments. Nobody asked, where are the 4 compartments? What are the 4 compartments for? Nobody asked him question. Nobody dare ask him question. When he spoke about dharmendriya, nobody questioned what is dharmendriya. We know only 6 organs, 5 plus 1 mind. Where is this dharmendriya? Nobody questioned him. What is meant by dharmendriya? Because all students were interested in collecting matters and pass it on to teaching. So all these senior foreign students, when they came here, they were interested in taking matter which they could transmit. And that's why I am quite severe. I said, my teachings are not meant for you to teach. You learn what I teach, it is for you to learn. I don't give matter for you to disseminate and go on broadcasting those things. But Guruji had this backbend intensive. They came, went back within 2 months, 3 months. Guruji saw the advertisement, fresh from Pune, backbend intensive. So a backbend workshop, a backbend intensive by ABCD. Various senior teachers started encashing on that. Pranayam intensive. They wanted only to gather something to just broadcast. This is the drawback in all Western students, except few exceptions like Lee. Otherwise, they only are concerned, what can I go and teach? Go back and teach in my studios. Now, Lee did not do that way. He was not looking for matter to teach. He was trying to get the matter for his involvement. But this was not the case. That's why he was odd one out. When he came with American group, Lee was the odd one out. Others were only looking for what matter can I take it, jottings, to go and blabber them back home in their studios. So they came here to learn what to teach, how to teach. Nobody came here to how to learn for myself. So having become teachers, they lost the quality to be a student. So they did not come and learn. I don't have to name you, but everyone without exception, except few like Lee, they were interested to really know the subject of yoga. Others were only concerned about what can I transmit and then do the marketing. I'm sorry, it might be bitter for any other Iyengar teachers to hear about it, but that's true. They should have become the genuine students and then ask the questions. Never did. They only had questions. I had such a problem, student having such a problem. What should I teach? What's the sequence? What should I avoid? This is what they were interested in teaching yoga. Nobody wrote him letters. What is that Dharmendriya you speak about? What is that philosopher that you speak about when you practice? Nobody. Just sound the problems of the students, try to get solutions, and do the marketing. I'm sorry, but that's what it was. And that hurt Guruji very much, that they are only interested to become good teachers. Nobody is interested to becoming a student of yoga. Leave aside becoming a good student, but at least become a student. So much so that even the pronunciation of asanas were not improved. Let me tell you, one of the very senior students, I heard this on YouTube. Guruji had discovered Parivritta Ardha Chandrasana. That was his brainchild. Parivritta Ardha Chandrasana. Get the opposite hand down and Ardha Chandrasana. One of the senior students, I heard this on the YouTube. What was the name he gave? Parvati Ardha Chandrasana. Parvati is consort of Shiva, Shankara. Parvati, consort of Shiva. He did not even register the name of the asana, and he on YouTube went public to say, I am showing Parvati Ardha Chandrasana. Parvati is a deity, goddess. So they did not even bother to become students, not even take names properly. Many of them could not pronounce Baddha Konasana. So I used to ridicule many times. Baddha Konasana is not a bad Konasana. But they would pronounce it as bad Konasana. Did not bother to improve the pronunciations. Well, that's a very basic thing. But anyway, so I would like to give more exposure to maybe during our sessions, when we start our session, because others should also hear about it. So that we will do it when we start our session in June. I expect one of you to shoot this question at me. What is meant when Guruji said he was philosopher while he practiced? What was that philosophy? Nobody had an idea about it. So that's how we can get going from there. Okay. And his teachings, he could not teach yoga at all. Nobody was interested in teaching, learning yoga. So he had to only teach what is good for teaching their students. Like he has syllabus. He would give them some additional points to really help them do their teachings better, where they came year after year after year. So they went back and became better teachers. All his students went back. Every year they came, every year they went back, they became better teachers. They did not bother to become better students. This is a travesty. This is a travesty. Very unfortunate thing. So therefore, we can embark upon that, and that will, the whole spectrum of philosophy, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, ashram, varnashram, dharma, karma, the karma practices. Because otherwise people think Hinduism is all ritualism. What is our internal ritual? Not an altar, fire, etc. offering necessarily. What is our yajna inside? So that will be fascinating topic. So I think we should do that in June. Okay?
That's great. Yes. I think we should too.
Okay, is that enough for the day?
Yeah, I think
Anything
so.
else you can ask me? Any question?
Yep.
Yeah?
Anything else, Lee?
No, you talking about Guruji's intuitive teaching reminded me of a time, one of the later times when he came over to actually take the medical classes, because Gitaji was out of station. And so he mentioned to a couple of us that you should make sure that you're there for the medical class. And he came, so instead of just being over on the side like he sometimes was in those days, helping a particular person, he was making his way around that. I don't know how many people were in some of those later medical classes. There must have been 60 of them, with all of the props and everything even around.
Yeah.
He made his way to absolutely every one of them. And I could see how he was intuitively inventing something on the spot that for each of these people. And I mean, none of our hands, Raya's hands, my hands, anybody else's hands who were there going around with him could move fast enough
Not only medical classes, but also your classes which he conducted as a intensives, etc. It was all intuitive. He did not have to work as a scientist to teach you people 3 weeks and 4 weeks and whatever. He was an intuitive teacher. And in his intuition, these materials did really come, but in a very minuscule scale that you could not really catch. So, and whatever philosophy was coming in, the students were conveniently sidelined, yoga is a dharmendriya. Why bother about it? We don't want that. We want what to teach for various problems. So students heard about it. 4 compartments of the heart, 4 compartments of the brain, their interrelationships. He spoke about esoteric physiology, anatomy, but that really did not have value for students. They were only concerned about taking what will have currency. When they go back, they should be able to impart. They should be able to teach. Nobody could have taught what is dharmendriya and why something to be done but dharmendriya. And therefore, they overlooked such precepts which came their way. 85th birthday, so many things came. Trigunas, Panchavrittis, Panchabhumis, Panchakleshas. So many things came their way, but that was not a teaching material for them, but they all overlooked. And they were only interested in collecting teaching material. So all over the world, all over India, we have wonderful Iyengar teachers, but no Iyengar student. No student of yoga, but all teachers of yoga. So this will be assessed in another 50, 100 years, and the generation will blame us. That's why I am working so much to push the philosophy, for at least on the ears of the student, they should hear about it something. Okay.
You are fighting the good fight in doing that, actually. You are fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
And I admire you very much for it.
Because Guruji did the foundational work. I said many times, I don't do what Guruji did. If I did what Guruji did, it would imply that Guruji did not do sufficiently.
No.
And therefore I have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. His teachings are all intuitive. Later, whether it was public or general class, whatever class, intensive or mega classes, it was all intuitive. Science was not there behind it. His intuition was working. His 80th birthday, 85th birthday, 70th birthday, it was all intuitive. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
We'll see you next week already.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Namaskar.
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 Thank you for tuning in to On the Light. Stay with us as we continue to unfold the life's work of BKS Iyengar and the auspicious subject of yoga. You heard at the end of this episode, Prashantji told Lee and I that he expects us to shoot the question about what was meant when Guruji said, "When I practice, I am a philosopher." Well, we did, and Prashant expounded on that for us during the Saturday morning talks he does through iNows. They were in June of 2023. The recordings are there to listen to on the iNows webpage. I have included a link to where you can find them in this episode's description. The quote from Mr. Iyengar that I would like to leave with you today is this: "As animals, we walk the earth. As bearers of divine essence, we are among the stars. As human beings, we are caught in the middle, seeking to reconcile the paradox of how to make our way upon earth while striving for something more permanent and more profound." Until next time, shine bright.
कौसल्या सुप्रजा रामपूर्वा सन्ध्या प्रवर्तते उत्तिष्ठ नरसार्दूल कर्तव्यं दैवमात्मिकम् उत्तिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ गोविन्द उत्तिष्ठ गरुडध्वज उत्तिष्ठ कमलाकान्त त्रैलोक्यं मङ्गलं कुरु तव सुप्रभातमरविन्दलोचने भवतु प्रसन्नमुखचन्द्रमण्डले विधिशङ्करेन्द्रवनिताभिरर्चिते वृषशैलनाथदयिते दयानिधे अत्र्यादिसप्तऋषयः समुपास्य सन्ध्या आकाशसिन्धुकमलानि मनोहराणि आदाय पादयुगमर्चयितुं प्रपन्नाः शेषाद्रिशेखर विभो तव सुप्रभातम् कमलाकुचूषुककुङ्कुमतो नियतारुणितातुलनीलतनो कमलायतलोचनलोकपदे विजयी भव वेङ्कटशैलपदे श्रीमत्सुन्दरजामा